Welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast, but as always, with a un poco nostalgic twist. I'm your host, Nick Bell, for this evening, and I'm delighted once again to be joined by Paul, my other co-host. How are you doing?
Doing very well, Nick. Doing very well. It's good to see you again. Good to be back on the show in a bit more rhythm. Obviously, having a week or two here and there with other ventures, but back and glad to be back in the rhythm of it. And looking forward to tonight's topic and discussing things with you and our brilliant guest.
Yes, absolutely. I already note that you have a wonderful yellow shirt behind you there, and there's one on the camera below. Below is, as always, is Mark. He is our guest this evening. He is the host of the Living Lacita Loca podcast, specialist English-speaking Spanish podcast. Mark, welcome to El Partido.
Thanks very much for having me, both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to have quite an interesting episode of this one. We've kind of been threatening to do it for a while, and incidentally, as I know we were speaking before we came on air, Mark, I was in Cadiz, as I mentioned, last Easter, and I was seeing all this, murals and posters in the city about this chat we're going to talk about, and I shared a video of him, and I think to this day it is one of the most liked, most followed, most shared video clips we've ever put on El Partido as well. So it's good that we're finally getting to speak about him. But before we do, as always, we want to find out about our guest, don't we, Paul? So, Mark, obviously, you've got this brilliant new podcast dedicated to all things Cadiz Club de Futbol. Cadiz itself, a club that has been, playing at the top end for, a while now. Have been performing well. Obviously, they've dropped back into the Spanish Segunda, which is, a fantastic league as well, one that contains, your club and mine, Malaga too. So how does a chap from West London end up hosting a Cadiz Club de Futbol English-speaking podcast?
I mean, that's a great question, Nick. I'm still not sure about that myself. It starts a long time ago. I've got a Spanish family. And so we were here every summer visiting them in the Madrid area. So I've always been aware of Spanish football, watching it from a distance. I then moved properly to Spain about 11 years ago now, so 2014. I was living in Madrid. I sort of went to a few Real Madrid games and stuff, but I think at that point I was losing interest in that tier of football, shall we say, maybe, and how it's run, etc. So you're looking for a sort of a better club to follow out. Maybe that's a bit harsh to say, but I struggled around Madrid. I sort of toyed with Leganés, thought about some of the other smaller teams around there, but I'd always sort of known about Cadiz. I started really following them a few years before I actually moved down here, and then so I moved down here 2 years ago now, and just fully into Cadiz, fully taken my heart. It's just an amazing football club, an amazing place to watch football, and there's such a history around it. It's such a unique club, I think, in Spain. And then the podcast, Living Lacita Loca, we started. I found Matt through one of your fellow co-hosts, Matt Harrison. He was doing an interview with him on the Giddy cast a while back, and I thought, there is another Giddy English-speaking season to get over here. I need to get in touch with him, and we can do something. So we eventually managed to get it started this year, and I mean it's been a good year to start it. Seemingly, we are sitting top of the league as we record this. Compared to last year, it's absolutely unbelievable feeling. So hopefully, we're bringing them a bit of good luck as well.
Yeah, it's all about timing, isn't it, Paul, when it comes to launching podcasts and such like that. And like you say, it is brilliant to see, more English-speaking podcasts, more, as we call them, Gibbies, that are, making content and telling the story of football clubs that are outside the so-called top two or three. And Cadiz is one that's always captured my imagination as well. There is a bit of needle between Cadiz and Malaga, so it's kind of a bit wrong for me to maybe admit that, Paul. But again, like yourself, have you always had a bit of a fascination with Cadiz too? Because it's always just been this kind of like mystical place to me.
Yeah, well, there's 2 points there. First of all, you're absolutely right. It's great to see more English-speaking content about Spanish football, and I like the fact that it's like there's a growing community of people who can just share their passions for the game and all things Spanish football. It's nice to have more, and I'm like you. We enjoy talking about Spanish football all day long. So the more people that we've got to engage with, the better. And having listened to Mark, I've listened to your podcast a few times, really enjoying it.
Thank
So
you.
great to have you on the scene. Yes, Cadiz. They're a club that have always fascinated me for a number of reasons. The fans, the passion, but one thing that I do have a weakness for is a good shirt, and I think Cadiz have always, the club has got quite a. We've spoken about it, I think, when we did one of the kits episodes about Villarreal. There's not always a lot you can do with a block coloured yellow shirt, but there's something classy about a lot of Cadiz shirts throughout kit history. I know the one that I've hung up behind me is one that a couple of years ago had a bit of a retro flair to it. It being a Macron design, and there's just something about Cadiz. I think they've always kind of played, and I'm probably going to sound a little bit like crass very early on here, but in recent years they've played kind of more of an attritional football that maybe isn't the easiest on the eye.
Oh,
However,
100% true. Yeah.
however, they have always had a bit of a tenacity about them as a team, and characters within the squad that have always been eye-catching as well. So, yeah, they're a club that I've always kind of like took an interest in as well. So, that's a long answer.
Well, I think they are one of those, fascinating, places from a historical perspective. Obviously, it was the gateway to, the New World, to
Yeah.
South America, which is again why you see, you go to Cadiz and you would think that you are in South America, but actually it's the other way around. It's where the inspirations come from, because it is, subtly slightly different. But from the football club perspective, it just feels like they go against the grain, don't they, Mark? In terms of like they want to be different, they want to be seen differently, known differently. They don't want to be like a Real Madrid. They don't want to be like a Seville. They want to do their own thing and celebrate their own passion, their own culture, and their own traditions, and do things their own way. And I think when it comes to the hymno, I think that's very much a look at that kind of approach to things by Cadiz fans, and how proud they are of where they're from too, which is always the part I take and respected about Cadiz, is that despite being in this very small little island at the edge of Spain, they are one of the most proudest bunches of people that you'll ever come across.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's an incredibly unique place. It's without being derogatory, it's a poor city, really. It's very dilapidated still. It looks run down still, but that gives it a charm as well. Don't get me wrong. Very working class, very obrero, as they'd say here, shipyards, dockers. It's always been a place of trade union movement and protest as well, and that feeds into the club massively as well. And again, you mentioned the hymno. Carnival is the other huge unique thing about Cadiz and the city and the area. And again, it's such a integral part of the football club as well. There's so many chirigotas and songs of the carnival about the football club, about the players. There's one about who we will be talking about in a minute as well. It's so intrinsically linked with these sort of very unique different aspects of culture.
Do you think it's fair to say as well that obviously you've talked about the working class stuff, which Nick and I being Northerners and working class, something we we very much have a lot of time for as well. But do you think that the clash of culture, in the sense of the dilapidated scenery mixed with the carnival atmosphere, and it creates a unique vibrancy as well, that you don't necessarily get in other parts of Spain. That I think it's fascinating is definitely a word that I would use for Cadiz. And as you say, that there's some bits of it which are very worn down, run down. I don't think that's but it does.
Some of the most beautiful beaches you'll find in the
Yeah,
world. This is the contrast again of this. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the juxtaposition between the two, it photographs brilliantly. Do you know, like there's something very aesthetically pleasing about seeing, and it's a long, golden beach or so. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Again, tangents are a regular thing on this podcast.
I will let you wax lyrical about Cadiz all day long, Paul. Don't you worry about that. And I suppose all of the above we've just mentioned there is one of the reasons why the man we're going to talk about now, Mágico González, wanted to join Cadiz, and he arrives in the city in 1982. The club were in the Spanish Segunda as well. He was quite a wanted man. Back playing in his native El Salvador. I think he was playing for CD FAS. I think it was Atletico Madrid that wanted him as well. So, Cadiz were in a bit of a bidding war, and as I sleepily wrote this morning, when they were flush with cash, therefore needed to, was not the case. Yeah, I would like to categorically say that I don't think Cardiff have ever been flush with cash, but they managed to convince him to come over because I think Mágico had this affiliation with Cadiz from the get-go. I think he saw it, and I think he saw maybe the similarities that he had back in El Salvador. The cityscapes, the cultures, the traditions, probably a lot more similar in Cadiz than it would have been in Madrid, for example. Do you think that's what attracted him to the peninsula?
I think that has to be part of it. It's hard to say how concrete the interest was from Atleti. I don't know whether they ever made a full-on offer for him or not. It took Cadiz, I think, about a month to convince him. Apparently, again, like a lot of the things we're going to talk about, there's conflicting stories. There's a lot of sort of haze and mist around everything to do with Mágico. But yeah, it takes him almost a month. He comes down to Cadiz. He's alongside another El Salvadorian player. I think Jaime Rodriguez comes down. One of the conditions he puts on is he wants Jaime to sign as well. So he's got a friend to, to sort of help him integrate. Cadiz sort of agreed to this, but he's already contracted at Bayer Erdinger, which I think is now Leverkusen. I'm not 100% certain on that. Any German football experts can correct me on that, please. But yeah, they don't want to let him go, so Cadiz can't sign him. Mágico sort of loses interest. I think he even goes off to Seville. They try and convince him again. Eventually, between Jaime Rodriguez and the club, they do manage to talk him into it again, and he comes back and does eventually sign at the end of July. So even then, he's sort of signs of maybe what's to come. But yeah, I think the city must have a lot to do with it. I think he must have felt at home. PSG are another club that were linked with him fairly regularly through his career and through his time at Cadiz. There's a famous quote that's been attributed to him that's, "Why do I want to go to France? I don't speak French. I don't like the people. I don't like the food." It's just sort of sums him up, really, I think. Yeah.
Probably could have stopped it at "Why do I want to go to France?" To be fair, we all would have just gone, "Yeah, fair play." I mean, that sounds absolutely great, and I think we'll come on to more how much of affinity he had for the city. There's a story particularly that I found hilarious when I was reading about it earlier on this week. But he does come and make his debut for Cadiz in the Spanish Segunda. He makes his debut against Real Murcia as well, and it was basically just love at first sight, wasn't it, Mark? It was just the way he would glide past defenders. He would take people on as if like gravity didn't apply to him. He'd bounce and smile. A lot of people made comparisons with him and Maradona at that time, but like when you look back at these videos of Mágico González doing it in Spain, there's no one to say he actually did it better. And in that first season, he scored 15 goals, helps Cadiz get promoted to La Liga, which we've mentioned a couple of times. Cadiz aren't a club that have sort of like an automatic right to be in the top division. They punch above their weight quite well, don't they? So for him to come in and have this impact, at this time, was nothing short of sensational, was it?
No. So before he signs, Cadiz are relegated from the top division. Only the second time they'd ever been there. Mágico comes in, like you say, he scored on his league debut. Before that, he scores 2 hat-tricks in the first 2 pre-season games he plays in. Just you can't start better than that. He injured his finger in that first league game against Murcia after scoring, misses the next game, comes back and scores both goals in a 2-1 win against massive rival Cadiz. I mean, you can't start any better than that. It's just an incredible start to go. Like you say, Nick, his movement is incredible. If you haven't seen any videos of him, I just urge you to just go and watch. Not only is his movement just different, otherworldly almost, yeah, just at that absolute top level. The thing for me particularly, but I think most people agree, is the control of the ball he has. It's like it's stuck to his feet, and just the weight of pass, the weight of his shots is just always so precise and perfect for what he's trying to do. He is just the top of the top. And like you say, the comparisons with Maradona, we know what Maradona said about. I'm sure we might come on to that. But there's another good comparison. Maradona signed the same year, isn't he, for Barcelona? I think they pay something like 3 million euros in real money. Mágico signed for 7 million pesetas that year, which is about 40,000 euros.
Bargain, absolutely. Yeah. That's just good scouting, really, if we're calling it anything. But I know, Paul, that you spent the best part of your week was rewatching some videos, and we kind of spoke to Guillaume about it a couple of weeks ago on Maradona, and we often think maybe people of a certain age that Spain has always been this sort of like technical football base where everything's tiki-taka and pleasant, high technical football. During the 80s, it wasn't. It was rough and ready. It was Wimbledon during the 90s style, week in, week out on, let's call a spade on, potato pitches is probably the best way to describe it. So for him to come here and have that kind of dominance in the rough and tumble of Spain at the time must have been nice to watch back, Paul.
Yeah, it was. I did lose quite a lot of time this week down YouTube rabbit holes of football clips of Mágico, and I would say there weren't many tap-ins either, but his ability to beat, in some cases, 2 or 3 people were particularly eye-catching. And you're right, it was at a time where I feel like we maybe have spoken about this in previous episodes about sort of the evolution of football in Spain, from everything from like the national team to club level, particularly prior to sort of the late 90s anyway. There was football in Spain was not too dissimilar from what is often labeled to be the English game nowadays. It's like it was quite a brutal league, and he comes in and he does it. And I think what strikes me is because on a lot of the compilations, they're never really in chronological order at all. But you can sort of you can see which is like early on and which one's not. And even from like the early clips, it kind of makes it look easy. Like he's always played in that league. It looked like he was just born to play. And I think one of the key things is when he arrives at Cadiz, he says he promises to play with joy, and that was what it was always about, was here for a good time, not necessarily a long time. I think it's certainly how he lived his life off the pitch as well. But I would recommend anybody who isn't maybe familiar with him or maybe just wants to lose a bit of time is to have a good route, because there's some fantastic clips, and you see what a special player he was within the first 2 or 3 goals of what is, for me, one of the best compilations, about 17 minutes long. And there was a fair number of free kicks in there as well, or shots from range. Absolute magician. And he had this, I don't know what it's called, that you sometimes see, or you used to see, like Ronaldinho do it, where it's with the sort of the toe of your foot, you kind of make it look as if you're going to go one way and then you flick it the other way, and by that point the defender's already been sold, hasn't it? Is it called like a flip flap or something like that?
Yeah.
I think it was. I think someone with Ronaldinho, they called it an elastico.
That's it, elastico. Yeah.
But Mágico's had his own name. He had his own sort of. It was called the culebra machateada, if I've said that right. Which is literally like the snake with a machete. So
yeah.
Snake,
and you know what? That's an even better name for it, because when it's what it looks like.
The crowd watching him in Cadiz would stop and they'd know it was coming, because if you watch Ronaldinho, he used to do it on the move and beat them sort of with pace and the movement. But Mágico just stops and goes, "I'm going to beat you one way or the other." Yeah, and the crowd,
it's predetermined.
It's coming. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to write I'm gonna have to write that one down or get to message me that in Spanish, because that is a great name for that move, which we're now going to associate with Mágico González, Ronaldinho, and Lee Trundle as well. Let's not forget. He was always a bit of a magic with that little with his toes and things like that. He always used to love a little flip flap type machete vibe with a machete type move as well. So it's good company to be in for Mágico there. It must be easy to put it down to managerial success that, Cadiz had this great season, got promoted back to, La Liga, had a player like Mágico working wonders. But it never seemed to me with him that he was inspired or motivated by the tactics, the managers, things like that. It was literally just his love of performing for people, and in particular the people of Cadiz, and his new life on the Atlantic coastline is really what inspired him to be this top player in Spain at the time. It was kind of like a match made in heaven, wasn't it? And I think he vibed and he fed off that applause, off that adulation, not just in the stadium either. It was in the streets, it was in Lavinia, it was when he was walking around town. He was just loved everywhere, wasn't he?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, he's an absolute free spirit. I don't know what position he wore the number 11. I mean, which he's made absolutely his own, iconic amongst Cadiz. You still see that being worn, by kids, adults, everyone still wears them. Suso has chosen the number 11 shirt coming back this year as the returning hero. Could have picked any number, 10, 8, but no, he's chosen 11. But yeah, so Mágico, just a real free spirit. I mean, childlike, you could almost say. Wasn't interested in training, wasn't interested in tactics, didn't really have a position, just did what he wanted to do, how we wanted to do, really. You say good management, Nick. I think, yes, his best seasons were with the managers that understood him or realised how to treat him, or maybe realised how to let him get away with things, shall we say. But his career at Cadiz is actually marked by what we might say now is just really poor man management, people that didn't understand him. And he probably lost a lot of managers their jobs, to be quite honest, that they just couldn't deal with him. They banned him, they fined him, they dropped him, and Mágico wins at the end of the day. The crowd want Mágico. They're not interested in David Vidal or whoever it was that had dropped him for 5 games because he hasn't been to training for a month. That Mágico is there. There's a brilliant instance later on that he's fined, I think it's 1 million pesetas or something, and the fans all just have a whip round and collect something like 200,000 within the first 24 hours and pay the fine. That says everything about his relationship with the fans and the club.
Yeah, because it was, it wasn't his antics off the pitch that sort of like was too much. Because he did have those late nights, and as you said, turn up to training. But kind of there was a trust put into him, especially in the earlier days. It kind of changed for his second stint, didn't it? But as long as he came and put in those world class, those dazzling performances that he'd do on a Saturday or a Sunday, they kind of just let him get away with it. And I think there was one story when I think you mentioned it before we started recording about when. Kind of went to the United States, wasn't it, to play against Barcelona, and he'd been up all night the night before. He'd been down to the discotheque and had a skinful. Turned up the next day, played against Maradona and co. as if he was, like he'd been asleep all night or something like that. He just played incredibly.
I think that's just Mágico. Yeah, he didn't like training, but he didn't need to. When you're that good, you don't need to. It's yeah. There's many stories of him just not training for weeks on end, and then just turning up and just pulling off some outrageous world class goal. Within 10 minutes of turning up, it's just operating on a different level, I think, to most people.
Yeah, it adds to the mysticism and the folklore, doesn't it? It's just, and I think as well that kind of only becomes more sort of enriched as time passes by, and fact and reality or merge and the legend grows. But that also makes him all the more endearing, I guess, for Cadiz fans, in the sense that he embraced a real sort of authentic love of the game, rebel spirit, like you say, and because he delivered, you're willing to tolerate that from a player that you perhaps otherwise wouldn't, you know.
And I'm sure there were some fans that didn't tolerate that,
Yeah.
and weren't, but in general, it was, you know. I spoke to one of my friends, Spanish friends, who was around when he was playing, and he said, "We all bought our season tickets to watch him, not the team. It was him." And that year he wasn't here. We gave him up. We weren't interested. We didn't want to go. Yeah, it's
It's crazy, isn't it? The way that, like you say, that misses him. I think maybe two of the instances that I know about that added to his sort of legend. I know one is definitely true. The other one, I'm not too sure if it is true. But I think in that game against Barcelona, I think they tried to substitute him, and I think then Maradona said, "No, keep him on." So Maradona on the opposition bench said, "No, keep him on. I want to watch him." That might be the mysterious one, which might not be true, might be true. But the one that he did say, which I think can be quoted, is that you know, I think they said these fans are great, but what they don't know is that there's a player even better than Pele and I, and he's called Jorge González El Mágico, and he still plays in Cadiz. He's phenomenal. For Maradona to say that, and let's call a spade, the ego that Maradona had at any time as well, for him to say that there is a better player than me and Pele down in Cadiz, you know, you can't buy publicity like that, can you? And, you know, I think it's fair to say that it's probably, you know, a good exclamation. Just because he's never played at that top level for those kind of clubs that we would bracket up there, doesn't mean that he wasn't ability-wise one of those top players as well, was it?
No, I agree, and I'd probably go so far as to say he wouldn't have played as well at a big club. He couldn't have done it. I think he would probably have admitted that himself. He said a few things along that line, you know. He was training. He's not that interested in. He wouldn't strict tactics. Not for him. You know, heading the ball. The head's for thinking. I'm not interested in heading the ball. You know. But like you say, no, Maradona wouldn't have given out that praise to virtually anyone, would he?
No.
For him to say that is such a sign of the quality of him.
And there was a bit of a what if, wasn't there, Paul, with Barcelona, because they were looking at him at a time, you know, like I say, in Spain, as it's always kind of been, though, you know, those type of clubs do look to pick the best of the crop. It's more international now, isn't it? But back during the 80s and 90s, it was very much let's see who we can hoover up from around the best of La Liga. Yeah. You know, what if he'd have joined Barcelona? Like I think Marcus maybe just alluded to, maybe it wouldn't have gone as well. Maybe it might have been a bit different. Would he have been as disciplined, or do you think they would have cut him loose?
Well, Barcelona at that time, I mean, bearing in mind it was a period where you didn't really have squads as such. You had an 11 and then a couple of backups. Really, it was still, you know. So within the dressing room, would there have been room for him and all of the other personalities in there with various degrees and approaches to professionalism? I think it's one of those that it would either have been the most successful thing ever or an absolute car crash. Either way, it would have been, you know, absolute cinema. But
I'm just imagining now the night out
with
Mágico González and Diego Maradona in Barcelona. I'm thinking, I don't think they would have been ready for it. I don't think they would have recovered from it.
Barcelona as a city may not have been ready for it. You know? Yeah, I think it's so hard. We always sort of have these conversations, don't we, about, like, you know, sometimes we call them sliding doors moments and things like that. But I don't know. I'm agreeing with you, Buck. I think, you know, if it had gone, it wouldn't have worked, and he wouldn't have been remembered in the same way that he is now. It would have just been another person that went to, you know, in this case Barcelona, and kind of gets forgotten about because of all the other things around it. And that would have been a real shame. I think it's almost perfect for him that he's able to have had this affinity with Cadiz that's been so long standing because of the moments that he created on the pitch. And I don't think you get that at another platform, so to speak.
No, I mean, this is probably the time to bring up the tour of the US when he goes with Barcelona. That's the end of the,
you've got to caveat this with, like, you know, how much of this is established fact. And now, yeah,
like everything, conflicting stories. No one really has the full truth of what went on. I think, yeah, a lot of people, it's sort of thought that he went on this tour with them in the pre-season in the summer, with the aim of Barcelona having a look at him to sign him.
yeah,
I think how true that is, I don't know, but there probably is some truth to it. But Cadiz needed money.
Yeah.
And they basically get a payment from Barcelona for him to go on this tour. He doesn't really want to go, apparently. I think he misses the bus to Seville or Jerez to get the plane. He then has to be driven up there, talked into going again. Eventually agrees. I think he gets some of the payment as well from from Barcelona. He gets rid of the money, but yeah, it's mainly seemingly that Cadiz just constantly through this period in debt, and a way of sort of helping out with that. But yeah, so the story goes, the famous myth there is that he's in the hotel one night, and the fire alarm goes, and all the players. Menotti's the manager at this time as well. You know, not the most strict or most disciplinarian of people maybe, but the fire alarm goes, everyone's out and accounted for except one. Who's this? Who we're missing? Oh, I think it's Mágico. Oh. So they go up to their room, knock on the door, open the door, and he's in bed with, I think, a waitress. Is the story goes. And yeah, I think that says a lot. Yeah, and women seem to have been his vice more than anything else. Supposedly wasn't a big drinker. He would drink something, but wasn't a big fan of it. He wasn't, he wasn't getting pissed all night every night. He just liked the atmosphere, liked the ambience, liked going out, being around music and people and life.
It was the way you described to me. He was a lot more bohemian than sort of like than a clubber, so to speak. You know, like say all these comparisons. Diego Maradona liked to go out and like say have a night out. Like you've just said, Mágico just liked just to be out and amongst people, like to be social. You know, like to listen to music. And he said, and I think that's a big difference for them there as well, isn't it? And I think, you know, when we speak about him joining Barcelona potentially, we've got to remember as well that we can look back on Maradona with rose-tinted glasses in his time at Barcelona, but he struggled because people didn't put up with his shit. They weren't like him going out all the time. They didn't like his turn up to train late, like, oh, let's train later in the afternoon so that Diego can come and sleep off his hangover so slightly and all that jazz. So, you know, it probably wouldn't have been a good fit. But again, that's where Cadiz comes back into it. Because, you know, I think Cadiz as a city lends itself to that kind of lifestyle. There are people, as you said, you know, whether it's the dock workers, whether it's the people who work in the town itself, but then they'll come out in the evening and they'll just be social. They'll all, you know, break bread around a table, have a couple of drinks, chat and party into the night ever so slightly, and then go home and go to work the next day. It's kind of like part of, I don't know if it's part of your life now, Mark. If it is, fair play to you.
No, I'm getting too old for this now.
But, you know, and there is this time when we can kind of see the effect on Mágico González when he does leave Cadiz for that first time, and he goes to Real Valladolid. I'm not saying that Valladolid is a bad city. I'm sure it's an absolutely beautiful city. I've never been.
It's supposed to be very nice, and yeah, the middle is supposed to be a very nice town centre. Yeah.
Yeah, but no one says to me go to Valladolid that often. If I'm being perfectly honest, you know, they tell me to go to Cadiz. They say go to Malaga. They say go to Barcelona and Valencia and places. It's never really high up on my list, but I think he kind of loses a bit of his magic there because he loses a lot of what is around him, that network, that culture that was around him in Cadiz, and he just fails to emulate the same antics on the pitch that he had in Cadiz for his new club, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't think he wanted to be there at all. Full stop. It's almost like a punishment. I think at that point he's been there 3 years. I think it's the end. It's the middle of the 84-85 season. He's fallen out with the manager. I think it's Benito Juanet at that point, who's a very sort of strict disciplinarian. You got to be at training. You got to be running. We're doing running and stuff. Anti-Mágico in that sense. He doesn't play much. I think he's fined. And just basically told to, well, I'm not sure if he's sold or loaned. There's some sort, again, there's a bit of a disagreement there in the writings, in the history. But he ends up at Valladolid in January. He just hates it. I mean, I think there's a story about him just sort of after training that he turned up to being just coming off the pitch is purple. Just the cold. Yeah, it's the complete. If you don't know Valladolid, it's right in the centre of the country. Well, a bit north of Madrid, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours north. Freezing cold in the winter. You know, it's dry, biting cold. You know, that it just hits your bones. It's really, really horrible. And Mágico, he's from El Salvador. He's been in Cadiz 3 years by the beach, and he's sent up to there. I think they say the first game he plays is against Real Madrid. I think he scores in that. 0 degrees and the pitch is just rock solid. It's frozen solid. So that's the difference that he's suddenly in front of him, and I think no, this isn't for me. I think he plays 9 games in total or something like that. And that's the end of it, really.
Which is a mad amount, isn't it, for such, for a year that you spent there, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I think as well. Is this the bit where I think there's a couple of headlines? I'm sure one of them is it comes with like El Genio Sin Control, the genius without control. I think is like one of the back pages of the papers as a criticism as him almost saying though it's like it's almost his own fault that he hasn't succeeded in Valladolid, which there might be he would contest that, but
I mean, I say it's his own fault he ended up in Valladolid, whether it's a succeeding in Valladolid,
it's notoriously cold there though, isn't it, for even as a stadium as well. Like you hear people not even like during the winter months in Spain, but just back end of September when there's an evening game, people have got the coats on, haven't they? Yeah.
It's not too cold for Mikel Moreno, let's put it that way. He seemed to have a good time up there the other night, didn't he? But maybe again, looking at another player who, maybe, let me just put this out there straight away, isn't as good as Mágico González, but Hatem Ben Arfa, when he went to Real Valladolid in January, signed there under a big aplomb, had 0 effect. And maybe it's just Real Valladolid, they just maybe anaesthetize these kind of characters. Who knows? It's we won't clip that. It's a stinging indictment in case you ever want to get a guest on Valladolid. It's not sounding that great at the minute.
And you're unfair to say he didn't have an impact, because he definitely had an impact on the finances that year. Like his wages were quite big, Ben Arfa. So.
And Monday I'll put out after Emerick Laporte wore the number 10 this week. They put like, can you name as an egregious number choice? And I was thinking I've got to go for a Spanish one, so I went with Tuquere Athletic Club as the number 2 striker with the number 2 on his back. But remember, Hatem Ben Arfa had a number 3. Which again, is maybe worse, if not a little bit better. But it's definitely, these are the tangents we end up on now. We've mentioned Real Valladolid, and now we're at Hatem Ben Arfa. Let's get back to the subject. Mágico returns to Cadiz after this ill-fated spell in Valladolid.
So he has this 6-month spell in Valladolid doing nothing, hating it. He then has a year off, basically. Cadiz decide, well, we don't particularly want him back at this moment. They fill their 2 foreigner spots with other players. And he goes back to El Salvador and is sort of, I think he plays.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. He's seen in Mexico playing a few exhibition games. I think he turned up in LA. There's sort of rumours that he drove a taxi in LA for a bit, maybe played in a couple of games there or something. But eventually I think he realises, I want to go back. So there starts to be a few feelers put out between him and the club. And then eventually there is an agreement reached. I think even Irigoyen, the president, even has a meeting with the socios. What do you think? Do you think, should we bring up 100% yes? Yeah, absolutely unanimous. Yeah, bring him back. But he's brought back on a slightly different contract, which is a sort of pay to play and some fairly significant fines for missing training, being late, etc., etc. So they sort of try. I wouldn't say to control him, but I think they maybe know what they're going to get this time. But Mágico is very, I've changed. I'm older. I'm 28 now. I understand. I'm going to change. It's not going to be like it was. And which, to be fair, it is probably for a couple of years. Is that down to him or the management? I'm not so sure. I'd say it's probably that he had some managers that dealt with him correctly in the following years. But those next 2 years are just the best years for both him and Cadiz. It's their most successful campaigns in Primera, really. So it was working.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was this year off and that he had all those things. But this just adds to the majesty for me of this such a unique man. And And I think, like I say, it's a match made in heaven because when he does go back, he's obviously made, he would have had an agent who I'm sure would have been, looking to get him offers from elsewhere and things like that. You don't become a bad player overnight and people don't, consign to the scrap heap.
Sure he did have I don't know. This is speculating here. I'm not convinced he's the sort of person that would have had an agent in the mid-80s.
Just did it all himself.
And the Cadiz president is almost like a father figure to him. So yeah, I think it was. I'm not convinced there was an agent. Maybe there was. I mean, he wasn't really interested in money, so it was given away fairly freely. So yeah,
to accept to pay as you play as well when you are a player of his caliber, says everything that he needs to know about. Yeah, you know what? I just want to be here. I want to be part of the success. I want to return somewhere where I'm familiar and where I'm loved, and and it didn't always work out. He wasn't a saint when he was there for his second stint either. There's a cracking story about David Vidal getting tipped off that he was at a disco in Cadiz, and because obviously the love for Mágico, the DJ, hid him under the DJ decks, I think it was, and then he fell asleep whilst he was there. So he woke up the next morning and got locked in, and he's stuck in there, isn't he? It's just again shows.
Maybe the cleaning lady woke him up or something. Yeah, it might be with that again. Just sort of smoke of time and mythology around him. We'll never know for certain. But yeah, that does seem to be a fairly true story. That one, it's just incredible, isn't it? It's,
I've seen it.
He had friends in all the bars. They always looked after him. Oh, watch out, they're coming. Oh yeah, don't worry. It was known and looked after by the owners of the bars in Cadiz.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that it's one of the ones that is highly likely true out of all the other myths, because there's a few instances that I've come across reading up on him a bit this week where he's reportedly slept in the dressing rooms the night before a game and stuff like that because he was worried that he would be late or not make it if he was at home or such. So, but again, this is another thing that we've said. It's hard to distinguish fact and fiction because of the mysticism with it.
Sleep 100%. It's just I could sleep in the Olympics. I think. Yeah, he's another. I can't remember which manager it was. Gave him a Donald Duck alarm clock. Said, "This is going to wake you up. This is, you can solve your problems." Didn't work. So then he sends I don't know, like not a mariachi band. It's not. We're not in Mexico, but maybe one of the carnival bands or something to his door. Banging and playing the music, and he gets up. I only got up because I like the music. No other reason. Yeah.
He sounds like such a great guy to be around.
Yeah. I've been driving around Cadiz in his bright red Ford Escort. I think Mark 1 Escort. Yeah, it must. What a time to be in Cadiz. Yeah.
What have been, and I think that's what there's two things that I take from Mágico González and his time in Cadiz. One of them is positive, maybe one not so positive. The first one is the city did love him, and I've made a note here to say that familiar surroundings are always good for people like that. They're inspired by it, aren't they? And the fact that maybe it looked a bit like home, as we mentioned before, it was the trading post. It was a gateway to the new world. El Salvador, obviously being a former Spanish colony, also doubled as Havana in Die Another Day. I found out earlier this week, which is always a fun fact. So I think, like you say, when he's in amongst that culture, it was just like a perfect fit. And as you've mentioned, all the people around him supported him. He was very bohemian. It's a very bohemian city. It was just perfect for that. The other point is, does it demonstrate this? I don't want to sound mean now, but it's wasted potential, isn't it? How many people would love to have the talents that he had, to have the success he could have had if he maybe had that more, I want to say, focused mindset, because he is a player who could have gone to the very top. He could have been, spoken about in the realms of Ballon d'Or. He could have been a Champions League winner if he'd have picked the right move, if he'd got that Barcelona move and, applied himself. We are talking about a player of that kind of ilk, aren't we?
People that have played with him, I can't remember who it was, have said, it's Messi, Maradona and him. And no one else comes close to that three. He's of that level, the very, very top level. I don't know if I totally get your point about if he just put his head down and applied himself, he could have been the best. But I don't think he could have been. I don't think he was built that way. I think his brain wasn't there. I think he's even said that my head it's different to people, whether that's a good or bad thing. I'm different. I don't think like that. I just want to play for fun and nothing else. And maybe that's why he's so beautiful. Maybe that is the romance, the free spirit, the beauty of football. There is better than putting your head down a la Cristiano Ronaldo and being the strongest, the fastest, the best in that sense. How do you define the best?
Well, there's lots of different parameters, and I think, to be fair, from a nostalgic podcast, angle, we would say, definitely he's the best, and because he's got that story that goes with him, doesn't he, Paul? Like you say, we're not trophy cabinets are great and all that jazz, but he's got his guitar and he's down the beach, he's absolutely fine. But I suppose from your perspective, Paul, would you agree with that? Do you think he
So he wouldn't be the first footballer that I've pondered whether or not it's the genius that can only sort of show itself when it's completely left without any kind of grounding anchor. For example, is it because that he's this eccentric character that allows him to do things and play without a sense of feeling constricted by tactics or whatever? Do you get these special moments where he just, obviously he's playing with a combination of natural talent and instinct. You get him, a moment of magic. If you lock somebody behind a set of rules and tactics, you don't necessarily get that moment of magic from him. And they're not in the same stratosphere, but think of like more recent footballers where you think there's a exceptional amount of talent and flair there, but the mind isn't. Mario Balotelli, for example, a lot of people would say when you watch him and he's just playing and he's in the moment, he was unbeatable. Like, nobody could take a penalty as consistently as he is. And like I say, they're not in the same stratosphere. But if he had a bit of a, they always used to say, if he had a brain, he'd be twice the player. And I don't necessarily think that is always true, because sometimes it's the lack of fear that allows, lack of fear of failure that allows genius players to do exceptional things. And I think the fact that pretty consistently in all of his quotes and interactions and the way he played, Mágico González was somebody who enjoyed the game first and lived in the moment, and you don't always get that if you're a super professional, boring James Milner type, to use a contemporary cliche sort of thing. I think that the fact that he was of a different breed is what helped him become an exceptional footballer on the pitch, playing like you would with your friends in the street as a kid. And if you try to put some discipline to that, you might lose your edge. I think that's the key thing. So I feel like his story is, and the relationship he develops with Cadiz as a city and with a club is kind of perfect for him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like if it to sort of say, if he went to Barca, or if he focused a bit, I don't necessarily think you'd get the same moments with him. I think you have to. That's the trade-off. You have to have the moments and the madness.
And I think from his perspective, and I'm sure Mark, you'll agree with us, is that I think he would take that legendary status, that affiliation, that aura that he has with Cadiz over any trophy that's in a cabinet that's sat, in his back room gathering dust. He would just. I think that's the kind of person he is into. And as you said, Paul, you don't get that from someone who wants to play football first. The first 10 yards are already. He's already beaten his man. He's not bothered necessarily about saying, right, well, I'm going to beat this man so I can get 3 points so we can win the league and I can be the top goal scorer and striker. I just think he was more, like you said, an in the moments footballer, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he's a rock star.
Yeah, that's a fair. Yeah, I thought Paul said something really interesting about playing like a kid. I think I saw when I was doing a bit of watching some videos and stuff. There was a documentary in Spanish right at the end. It's him talking actually. So this is true. He said, "Oh, someone asked me at school when I was about 15, what do you want to do? What do you want to be?" And he was like, "Oh, I just want to be the same as I am now." And I think that just sort of shows you how he thought, how he was. That was yeah, just an innocence almost, even maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think,
And
like you say,
again, the other thing to pick up is the Cadiz thing. Not only did Cadiz and the fans and just love him unconditionally, he did love Cadiz unconditionally himself. Yeah, it was a symbiotic relationship, to use a sort of fancy term. It was very much, both of them. It was a two-way thing for them. Yeah, definitely.
and time is always, a great measure of these things. And the very fact that we're having a discussion in a modern medium on a podcast about him as a player, 40 odd years later, it shows a testament of the kind of quality superstar he was. He was maybe slightly appreciated in Cadiz. Sorry, not in Cadiz. He was definitely appreciated in Cadiz. In Spain at the time. Nowadays, though, he is widely regarded as one of the best to do it in Spain. One of the La Liga legends, isn't he?
He absolutely was. I think when Cadiz got on this brilliant run in Primera from in the mid '80s, he was very much known and appreciated in Spain. Definitely. On a similar point, I wanted to ask you two, before doing the research for this, what did you know about him? Because I don't think he's very well known in the English speaking areas.
So I knew bits of him from, like, being an enthusiastic fan of Spanish football over the years. You pick up hearsay stuff, and as we've said throughout this, the bits that sound like they're true, but you're not quite sure if they're true. And I'd always sort of seen tiny moments of him. But one of the things that really sort of got us talking was obviously the clip that we posted, or Nick posted earlier in the year. Was it very early days, wasn't it? In the live,
one of the first ones we ever did.
Yeah, and he stood out, and then I sort of fell down a few rabbit holes with him. And then, actually, as it happens, when we had Brendan Madden on, he's featured in Brendan's book, or a part of Brendan's book, on Cadiz, and you get drawn into the character, don't you? And then since then, I've just found myself losing a lot of time watching clips of him and reading about him, and yeah. But before that, you're right. I'd have to say it was very limited, and were I more of a lay fan of Spanish football, or one of these people who only really watches the club that that I support, I don't think I would know anything about him really, which is quite tragic. But I don't know, Nick, if you've got a different experience with it.
I point a lot of my learnings and facts to the man I used to do a podcast with, Matt Harrison, and he we were talking about him. I think before we were recording a GiveCast episode, and then incidentally again when I said I was going to Cadiz at Easter, he said, "Oh, you should do a Mágico González episode. That'd be good. That'd be really cool. I'd listen to that." And that kind of maybe then, when I was there and I saw all the stuff, I was thinking, I'm going to post a bit about that. I'll put the video there, and just like the immediate draw of attention. And at the time we were quite like, we are still small fry. Let's call it spade a spade. But like, you got a lot of likes, and you're like, "Oh, this is endorphin boosting. Maybe some more Mágico González stuff would be quite good." But the more and more I thought about it, and like you say, the warrens we ended up going down and watching his videos and listening to his interviews and stuff like that, and kind of like getting enveloped in the legend of him was one of the reasons when we were especially planning out this season 2, Paul, wasn't it? We said we've got to do a Mágico González episode. Let's reach out. Let's see what we can get and how we can talk about him. And yeah, like you say, I suppose the short answer is I didn't know loads about him before I started doing this podcast, but I to be honest, I still don't think I know all about him. There's too much to learn about him, isn't there? He's an enigma beyond limitation is probably the way to go for it. But yeah, I echo what both of you said in this episode already. If you have got yourself a little bit of spare time, go and just onto YouTube, type in Mágico González and just admire him, because he was a genius. And the way he played football was so beyond most people's abilities at that time. I was trying to think of a comparison as well to kind of like put him up against. And you talk about your George Bests and your Kevin Keegans and things like that. And he's got a bit of that about him, doesn't he? But maybe with that South American flair, in that carefree attitude type thing.
He reminds me of some of the Brazilian players that you used to see in like the late 90s, early 2000s, where they kind of looked like they come from the future and were playing against players that were not used to going up against an individual with that much natural flair and ability. If you watch some of those old clips, it does look like it's a modern footballer that's traveled back in time and he's playing in a very contemporary way. That makes him stand out because he, like I say, we think of some of the sort of skills and tricks and things that we perhaps see players do now as being like inventive or innovative, and actually no, players like Maradona, Mágico González, and most of the greats were doing them a long time ago. I mean, I've seen some clips of, if you look back at Pele's first World Cup in what's that now, 60 years ago, 70 years ago,
yeah,
50s, wasn't it?
Yeah, 50 would be nearly 75 years ago. And
you watch some of his touches, and you think, you see people still trying to perfect that now. But back then, what must it have been like, and you get the same feeling. We talked about that little move with the toes, You still see people doing that now.
Including Lee Trundle as well, may I add?
Yes, yeah. It stood the test of time anyway, hasn't it? So
doing it on those pitches with those balls as well. This is the boots as well. All the the materials of the kit is so much better now to do this stuff with. Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah, the boots are a story in themselves, aren't they? You think about I grew up in the 90s and the boots were quite thick then compared to what they are now and what the players were. But to think a decade or so before that, what they must have been like.
Oh, it must have been mad. And like you say, we look back fondly at him as one of Spain's greatest players, and I'm sure he'll be a legend in Cadiz forever as people pass down these tales. And it'd be interesting to see maybe in 15, 20 years' time what other kind of mad stories come out of the woodwork about him. I'm sure there'll be many, especially, in the bars around Living. So I look forward to hearing those. I hope for myself sometime soon, Mark, because obviously, I imagine as part of your patronage of being a Cadiz podcast host, you would definitely recommend people getting down to Cadiz to watch a game, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely! It's truly one of the real experiences of Spanish football. It is different to a lot of places. The stadium's fantastic as well, really steep sided, and when the noise gets going in there, it's very loud and different to a lot of other Spanish stadiums. And just added in with just being in Cadiz for the weekend or for a day even, it's just a really good trip, a really good day out, and highly recommend it to anyone to do it.
Yes, and if anyone is heading down there, can we point them your way to say, go and meet Mark and Matt? And
do give us a shout on Twitter or anything, or Instagram. It's Living Lacita Loca. You can find us there. We'll give you all the help you need and meet you up for a beer, definitely.
Perfect. It's going to the top of it's my birthday soon, so maybe I'll try and wangle that into the conversations with my wife. We'll see how that goes. But I must say, Mark, thank you so much for joining us this evening, for bringing the magic of Mágico González alive. It's been an absolute pleasure, and cheers for your time.
No, it's absolutely been my pleasure to join you guys. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all. And Paul, I'll say thank you to you as always. Cheers for joining me on a Thursday evening to talk all things Spanish football nostalgia.
Pleasure as always, and thanks Mark as well. Yeah, really enjoyed that. It's been thoroughly enjoying, and thank you as well for putting this on. It's making sure that we could actually get this episode done, because we've been thinking about it for a long time, and because of that, I have lost, like I say, a lot of hours this week watching some really entertaining clips. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyable.
No, an absolute pleasure, and yes, we'll make sure that we. I think we might have to do like a Mágico González piece for the Revista El Partido as well one day, Paul. That seems that'll be cinematic in terms of all the pictures we could put up there too. Speaking of which, very tedious, poor linkage made there on the podcast. Go and read the issue 1. You can get that now on our Patreon page. If you become a free member, you can read that completely gratis. We've got some great stories about David Silva in Eibar. You've got Diego Maradona in Granada, and you've also got me in Yekla, which is less exciting, but still a good story nonetheless. If you want to go back and listen to some of our other episodes as well, go on to Spotify or Patreon or wherever you get your podcasts. We've got loads of really fantastic interviews like the one we've just done with Mark, and a whole back catalogue where you can go back to the beginning as well, because this is the beauty of this podcast. It is timeless. You know, you can listen to it whenever. We're not bound by football results and fixtures. It is beyond that. So, yeah, definitely go check those out and give us a follow on social media if you are not already following us at elpartido.es. But for now, I'll say thank you to all for listening at home. It's been a pleasure. Hathaway go. We'll see you next time.